Centuries before the shinobi era, a powerful user named Gon Freecss wrote down his teachings on Nen, his unique entity source. Realizing its potential danger, Gon hid his scroll in the hopes that only someone with a pure heart could access it and use it for good. Over time, the scroll became lost in a sense of history, awaiting its destined reader. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the quiet streets of Konoha as Naruto Uzumaki wandered through the bustling village. It was one of those rare days when he wasn't caught up in some mischief or training, and his restless mind wandered. His heart was heavy, though, not from anything physical, but from the weight of loneliness. Even now, as he walked among the villagers, there was an invisible barrier between him and everyone else. They saw him as a monster, a creature to be avoided and feared. But to Naruto, that loneliness only fueled his determination to prove them wrong. The village was alive with activity, but Naruto's feet carried him toward a place where he could always find solace, the Hokage Library. It was an old building, with its towering shelves of scrolls and books, a maze of knowledge where time seemed to stretch and warp. The librarian, a kind old woman named Kairi, often looked the other way when Naruto slipped inside, knowing the boy would never cause trouble there. The library was one of the few places where he could escape the harsh glares and whispers of the villagers. Here, among the dust and forgotten scrolls, Naruto could be himself if only for a while. As he entered the library, Naruto noticed that the usual quiet atmosphere felt different. There was a faint hum in the air, like the space itself was alive, as if something was calling to him. His eyes darted around, scanning the familiar shelves. Most of the books here were old, filled with the history of Konoha, battle techniques, and long-forgotten Zetsu. But something about today felt special, as if the library had secrets it was ready to reveal. Naruto's fingers ran along the rows of scrolls and books. He knew this place like the back of his hand, but today, there was something he hadn't noticed before, a faint glow, barely perceptible, emanating from behind a stack of dusty old books. His curiosity piqued. Naruto moved closer, parting the books to find the source of the strange light. There, nestled between two large tomes, was a scroll, unlike any he had ever seen. The scroll was old, with a weathered, yellowed appearance, its surface covered in intricate symbols that glowed with a soft, ethereal light. It was almost as though it was calling to him, beckoning him to open it. Naruto hesitated for a moment, then, without thinking too much about it, reached out and picked it up. The moment his fingers made contact with the scroll, a surge of warmth rushed through his body, making him shiver slightly. It was as if the scroll recognized him, or perhaps, it had been waiting for him. With trembling hands, Naruto unfurled the scroll. The ancient parchment was covered in writing, but the words seemed to shift and change as his eyes scanned them, adapting to his mind, molding into something he could understand. The symbols transformed into words he could comprehend, as if the scroll was alive and responding to him. He could feel it, whatever this was. It was far beyond anything he had ever encountered. "Welcome, Naruto Uzumaki," the scroll began. "Only one with a pure heart, free of selfish desire, can unlock the power contained within. You are the one chosen to wield it." Naruto blinked, confused. "What is this? Who wrote this?" The words shifted again, and a new message appeared. "I am Gon Freecss, a traveler who once sought to understand the power of Nen. This scroll contains the secrets of that power, passed down through the generations. I cannot explain it all here, but I trust that you will find your way." Naruto's brow furrowed. He had never heard of anyone named Gon Freecss before, nor did he know what Nen was. But something deep inside him resonated with the words. He felt a strange connection to the writer of the scroll, as though they shared some unspoken bond, even though they were from two different worlds. The scroll continued to reveal more about Nen, describing it as a power that existed within all living beings, a force that could be harnessed by understanding and controlling one's own life energy. It wasn't chakra, but it sounded similar in many ways, something that could be shaped, molded, and used for many purposes. The scroll spoke of different types of Nen abilities, but warned that only those with a pure heart, someone not swayed by greed or malice, could ever hope to truly understand it. Naruto's heart pounded in his chest, Pure heart? Was that really him? He had always been filled with determination, but could he truly be the one the scroll was meant for? He had never thought of himself as particularly pure. He had spent most of his life fighting against the world's prejudices, constantly seeking the approval of others, especially his parents and the villagers. But something about the scroll's words resonated with him in a way he couldn't explain. The warmth in his chest intensified as he continued to read. The scroll revealed a path, a journey to unlock his potential, to understand and harness its power. But it wasn't something that could be learned overnight. The scroll spoke of training, trials, and the need to reflect deeply on one's inner self. But Naruto felt an unshakable resolve stir within him. He could do this. He didn't care if it was difficult or if others didn't understand. He would find a way to master this power. The last words on the scroll made Naruto's heart race. I am no longer of this world, but I trust you will carry the legacy of Nen. You are the next one to inherit this power. Remember, only with a pure heart can you truly unlock your potential. If you seek power for selfish reasons, you will be consumed by it. Choose wisely, Naruto Uzumaki. The scroll began to fade, its glow dimming as the final words dissolved into nothingness. The warmth left Naruto's body, and he was left standing in the quiet library, the scroll now nothing more than a simple piece of parchment in his hands. Naruto stared at the scroll, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. He had always longed for a way to stand out, to prove his worth. But now, this power, Nen, had been thrust upon him. He wasn't sure what to make of it all, but one thing was certain, he couldn't turn back. He didn't know where this journey would take him, but he could feel that this was the opportunity he had been waiting for. His fingers tightened around the scroll as he tucked it into his pouch, determined to understand its mysteries. He didn't know who Gon Freecss was, or why this power had been left for him, but he knew that he was meant to find out. All right, time to get to work, Naruto muttered to himself with a grin. A new path had opened before him, and he would walk it, no matter what challenges lay ahead. As he left the library, the last remnants of sunlight dipped below the horizon, casting the village in darkness. But for Naruto, a new light had been kindled within him, a light that would guide him on a journey unlike any he had ever known. With a scroll in hand, Naruto's journey to master Nen was just beginning. Over the course of the next few weeks, Naruto dedicated himself to the ancient scroll with a single-minded focus that surprised even him. It was the first time in his life that he had been so driven to learn something for himself, not for the villagers' approval or his parents' attention, but because he felt a pull in his very soul. This power, Nen, was like nothing he had ever encountered, and despite the confusing terminology and difficult concepts, he was determined to understand it. The scroll spoke of Ten, the first and most fundamental concept of Nen. It described Ten as a method of controlling one's aura, a shield that protected the user from external forces and maintained their strength. At first, Naruto struggled with the concept. He was used to his chakra, of course, but this was different. Chakra flowed through him naturally, like an extension of his very being. Aura, on the other hand, was a strange new force. He could feel it within him, like an energy that bubbled just beneath the surface, but it didn't come as easily as chakra. The first time Naruto tried to harness his aura, he felt a sharp pain in his forehead, and his body seemed to burn with an intense heat. The sensation was overwhelming, and he nearly fell over in the middle of his training. He groaned, wiping sweat from his brow as he sat cross-legged on the ground. What's going on? Why can't I just control it like chakra? The scroll had mentioned that the key to controlling Nen was in the mind. It was not something that could be controlled with pure force alone, that required self-awareness, focus, and patience. But those weren't exactly qualities Naruto was known for. He was impatient, impulsive, and often acted before thinking. Still, he was unwilling to give up on this. He continued his training, day in and day out, pushing through the confusion and the frustration. Slowly, he began to understand the feel of his aura, how it flowed and how it resisted control at first. The more he meditated, the more he could sense the aura enveloping his body like a thin, almost imperceptible cloak. It wasn't as powerful as he wanted, but it was a start. With each attempt, he could feel it growing stronger, more stable. His days were spent in intense concentration, sitting cross-legged in the clearing just outside Kanata, where he could be alone, away from prying eyes. The villagers were too afraid to venture near him, and that isolation suited Naruto perfectly. He didn't need their doubts or judgment while he worked. He needed nothing but the stillness of his mind and a scroll to guide him. It wasn't until one quiet afternoon, as he sat in deep meditation, that something remarkable happened. Naruto had been concentrating for hours, his mind focused entirely on his aura, willing it to expand outward and protect him. At first, the sensation was faint, a soft warmth around his body that he could barely feel. But then, as his thoughts cleared and his breath slowed, it happened. He felt his aura stretch out, a protective layer wrapping around him, much like the shroud of chakra he was familiar with, but it was different. This energy was more refined, smoother, and it radiated outward like a gentle pulse. For the first time, Naruto was able to maintain his aura surrounding him in a stable, protective shield. It felt like a powerful, invisible barrier, but it was also soothing, comforting even. The rush of success filled him, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond anything he had ever felt with chakra alone. "I did it," Naruto whispered to himself, his voice barely audible against the stillness of the forest. His heart raced with excitement. He could feel the energy surrounding him, protecting him, and it made him realize just how different this power was from chakra. This wasn't about raw strength or destructive force. It was about control, about balance. And for the first time in his life, Naruto felt like he was in control of something powerful. He stood up, testing his newly formed The aura still clung to him, wrapping around his body like a second skin. He could feel its presence in every movement, subtle but constant. His senses seemed sharper now, as though the shield was amplifying his awareness of the world around him. Even the slightest breeze felt more pronounced, and he could hear the rustle of leaves in the distance, each sound clearer than before. This was just the beginning, but it was a step forward one Naruto was proud of. But even as he reveled in his success, the scroll's warning echoed in his mind, "Only with a pure heart can you unlock your true potential." It was a reminder that this power was not to be taken lightly. He could feel it, this energy was alive, and if he didn't control it properly, it could consume him. It wasn't just a matter of strength, it was about balance and self-discipline. And that, Naruto knew, would take time. Time skip. Several months later. Months passed, and Naruto's understanding of Nen grew deeper with each passing day. He had mastered and now he was ready to move on to the next step, Zetsu. Zetsu was the opposite of the act of releasing one's aura to conserve energy and recover. It was a necessary counterbalance, allowing the user to recuperate and prevent their aura from being overextended. The concept was foreign to Naruto at first, who had always believed in pushing through exhaustion. But the scroll's teachings had slowly reshaped his view. Power wasn't about force, it was about balance. Naruto began practicing Zetsu during his meditations, consciously retracting his aura inward until it was barely noticeable. It wasn't easy. His natural instincts screamed at him to push outward, to extend his aura and show his strength. But he learned quickly that conserving energy was just as important as exerting it. The more he practiced Zetsu, the easier it became to control his aura, and the faster his body recovered. He began to feel a sense of harmony within himself, his aura no longer a chaotic force but a steady, controlled energy that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. With each new concept he learned, Naruto's Nen abilities grew stronger. He soon found himself able to switch between and Zetsu with ease, his aura shifting in response to his needs. It was a strange feeling, like he was tapping into an entirely new form of strength, one that didn't rely on his usual brushed methods. He had to think before acting, feel before striking. Still, there was one aspect of Nen that Naruto had not yet touched: Hatsu, the ability to release one's aura in a controlled, purposeful way. The scroll hinted at its power but didn't go into detail. Hatsu was the pinnacle of an user's control, and Naruto couldn't wait to see what it would feel like. But he knew he wasn't ready. His mind wasn't calm enough, and his emotions still had a way of clouding his judgment. But he was patient. He knew he would get there eventually. One night, after an especially long training session, Naruto collapsed on the ground beneath a tree, exhausted but content. The stars above twinkled like tiny diamonds, and the gentle rustling of the leaves in the wind provided a sense of peace he rarely found. He looked up at the sky, his thoughts drifting. "I wonder what kind of person Gon was," he muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. "What did he see in me? Why did he leave this power for me?" The scroll had mentioned Gon's name many times, but it had said little else about the man himself. He didn't know if Gon had been some kind of sage, a warrior, or something else entirely, but there was a connection Naruto couldn't deny. Something about the way the scroll had spoken to him like Gon was guiding him, even after all this time. Maybe one day, I'll meet him," Naruto said, his voice filled with determination. "And when I do, I'll be strong enough to understand what he saw in me." With those words, Naruto closed his eyes, feeling his aura settle around him once again, calm and controlled. There was still so much to learn, so much to discover. But for the first time in his life, Naruto felt like he was on the right path, one that would take him beyond the walls of Hinata, beyond his village, and into a world where he could finally find his place. Naruto had always been the type to charge forward with everything he had, but now, as he stood in the quiet forest clearing, a new understanding was dawning on him. It had been several months since he first discovered the power of Nen, and through endless hours of meditation, training, and study, he had come to realize something profound. He had a unique affinity for a particular type of Nen, a type that he had yet to fully comprehend but felt instinctively. It was something he shared with the mysterious Gon Freecss, whose words had guided him thus far. Gon had been an enhancer, and Naruto now understood that he, too, was drawn to this path. An enhancer, as the scroll described, was someone who specialized in increasing their physical strength and enhancing the natural abilities of their body through Nen. Enhancers like Gon were known for their raw power and resilience, using their aura to amplify their physical capabilities in combat. This revelation made sense to Naruto in ways he couldn't fully articulate. All his life, he had been driven by his desire to grow stronger, to prove himself capable of more than what others saw in him. Chakra had always been a part of that drive, a tool that let him push beyond human limits. But Nen was something more, something deeper. The affinity for enhancing wasn't something that had been taught to him. It wasn't in the scrolls or the lessons of Nen. No, it was something he could feel, an innate pull that guided him toward this path. He wasn't just trying to enhance his chakra or his mind, he was enhancing his very essence, his body, and his spirit. He felt the energy surging through him, the potential to break through the boundaries of his own physical form, and it was exhilarating. Naruto's mind was racing with possibilities as he stood up from his meditation, wiping the sweat from his brow. He had been training hard, his body pushed to the limits of fatigue, but now he knew he was ready to take the next step. He needed to harness his new affinity and apply it in a way that would allow him to truly understand the full scope of his power. He had already mastered Ten, the aura shield, and Zetsu, the act of releasing his aura for recuperation. Now, he would learn Ren, the technique used to forcefully increase the output of one's aura, making it flow with greater intensity and power. He had to test his physical limits, to prove that he could push past his boundaries, just as he had always done with chakra. Naruto had already spent some time experimenting with Ren, but he had never truly pushed himself. Today would be different. He had prepared a set of heavy rocks and barriers in a clearing outside Hinata, which would serve as his test. The rocks were large, much larger than anything he had ever attempted to lift before, and the barriers were built of thick wood strong enough to resist even the force of his raised Nen. Naruto was confident that with the power of Nen, he could break through them with ease. The sun hung low in the sky as Naruto approached the pile of boulders. His pulse quickened as he focused on his aura. He could feel the energy swirling inside him, the Nen within his body, just beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. He drew in a deep breath and placed his hands on one of the largest boulders. He concentrated, recalling the basic techniques he had learned from the scroll, to focus, to gather, and to direct the energy outward. With a grunt, Naruto pushed his Nen outward, allowing the aura to manifest through his body. The feeling was intense. His auras surged around him, as if it was an extension of his physical being. He felt his muscles stretch and contract in response to the Nen, and for a brief moment, it was as though he had become one with the rock. He was the rock. His body was filled with power, and he pushed with everything he had. The stone trembled, and then, with a crack like thunder, it broke apart beneath his hands. Naruto staggered back in surprise, but the rush of victory coursed through his veins. He had done it. The power of Ren had amplified his physical strength to a degree he had never thought possible. His Nen had fused with his body, propelling him beyond his usual limitations. This is incredible," he exclaimed, his voice echoing in a still forest. The boulder lay shattered at his feet, and Naruto couldn't help but grin widely. He wasn't just stronger, he was different. He felt like he had transcended the limits of his own flesh, pushing himself into a new realm of power. But he didn't stop there. The success only fueled his desire to push further. He turned to the next obstacle, a wall of thick wooden barriers. These would be a true test of his ability to apply Ren with precision. His fingers crackled with energy as he focused on the wood, his body brimming with Nen. He stepped forward, using his newfound understanding of Ren to focus the output of his aura. With a deep breath, he charged, his body surging with energy. As his feet pounded the earth, the aura around him flared brightly, filling the air with a hum of power. He struck the first barrier with his fist, and there was a resounding crash as the wood splintered and shattered into pieces. Naruto didn't stop. With each hit, he broke through another barrier, his strength multiplying as the Nen surged through his body. His strikes were fast, precise, and relentless, each one landing with a force that made the ground tremble beneath him. By the time he reached the final barrier, his breathing was heavy, but his spirit was alight with a rush of power. With one last, concentrated punch, the final barrier splintered into fragments, the wood collapsing in a heap around him. "Yeah. This is amazing," Naruto shouted, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration filling him. He had pushed himself further than he ever thought possible, using his Nen to break through the barriers in ways that Chakra alone never could. The fusion of Chakra and Nen within him was becoming clearer, each enhancing the other, strengthening him in ways he could never have imagined. But even as his confidence swelled, Naruto knew that this was only the beginning. The scroll had warned him that the true test of Nen wasn't just about raw strength. It was about understanding and controlling it. It was about mastery over one's own body, mind, and aura. The more he enhanced his physical power, the more he would need to learn how to wield it. Naruto's mind turned to the next step, Hatsu. The final technique of Nen, the one that would allow him to project his aura outward in a way that reflected his personality and his will. It was the manifestation of his Nen, his true power. He had been avoiding it, unsure of his readiness, but now he knew it was time. If he truly wanted to become stronger, to push past the limits of his power, he would need to confront this next challenge. With his body still humming with the after effects of his Ren training, Naruto sank into a sitting position on the forest floor. He closed his eyes, his breathing deep and steady. He needed to focus. He could feel the presence of his Chakra and Nen within him, a swirling maelstrom of energy that threatened to burst free if he didn't keep it in check. Hatsu. He repeated the word in his mind. What is my true power? His thoughts swirled, the power of the enhancer coursing through him, but there was more to Nen than simply enhancing physical strength. To unleash Hatsu, he would need to find his true intention, the essence of his being that would manifest through his Nen. What was it that made him different from anyone else? What was the source of his strength? As he meditated, Naruto reflected on his life, his struggles, his loneliness, and the deep desire to protect those he cared about. He had always fought not just for himself, but for the people who mattered to him. It was his unyielding will, his refusal to give up, that had brought him this far. His strength came from his belief that no matter what, he would never stop fighting. Naruto opened his eyes. He knew what he had to do. All right, he muttered to himself, determination burning in his chest. Time to move on to the next step. I'm ready. With that thought, Naruto stood up, ready to face the next challenge on his path. The journey ahead was still long, and there was much to learn, but he was more certain than ever that he was on the right path. The power of Nen would be his, and with it, he would carve out a new future for himself, one where he could not just be accepted, but truly respected. And with that, the path of the enhancer became clearer, his strength now his to control, his destiny waiting to unfold. Naruto had learned much about Nen in the months since he discovered the ancient scroll hidden in the deepest quarters of Konoha's library. His body had grown stronger, his aura more refined, and his understanding of his abilities had deepened in ways that were almost beyond his comprehension. Yet, as powerful as his enhancer techniques had made him, there was still something that eluded him, something that would push him to the next level. It was time to learn Hajinkan. Hajinkan, as described in a scroll, was a technique used by none other than Gon Freecss, the one whose presence and teachings had inspired Naruto's journey with Nen in the first place. It was a devastating technique, one that channeled the user's aura into a single, focused strike, amplifying the power of their punch to levels that could shatter mountains or, at least, large portions of earth. It was a test of both control and power, a technique that required precision as well as the mastery of one's aura. It would take everything Naruto had to learn it. The scroll was clear, mastering Hajinkan wouldn't come easily. It wasn't just about having a strong aura. It was about aligning that power with one's will, about creating a direct link between mind, body, and Nen in the purest form possible. To properly execute Hajinkan, Naruto would need to learn how to focus his energy into a single point of contact, directing it outward with pinpoint accuracy. And so, Naruto began his training. It wasn't long before he realized just how difficult this technique truly was. At first, it seemed so simple: gather all your Nen into one focal point, then strike with all your might. But as he began the first series of attempts, he quickly discovered that controlling the power in such a concentrated way was far harder than it appeared. The first few tries ended with his punch sending wild waves of energy crashing through the surrounding trees, leaving deep dents in the earth and causing the ground to shake. The force of the punch was overwhelming, but it lacked focus. His aura flared out in unpredictable ways, wasting energy, and causing chaos. Ugh, why is this so hard? Naruto growled, frustration building as he stood amidst the wreckage of his failed attempts. His body ached from the strain, his muscles sore from trying to focus so much of his energy into a single strike. He took a moment to breathe, wiping sweat from his brow. His mind raced. Focus. I need to control it better. I need to center myself. The key, he realized, was not brute force but control. It was one thing to unleash raw power, but Hajinkan demanded a precision that Naruto had not yet fully grasped. He was used to being a force of nature, fast, furious, and powerful, but now, he needed to learn patience. He needed to gather his Nen and focus, letting it gather at the right moment and strike with all the precision of a sharpened blade. He closed his eyes and began to meditate. He breathed in slowly, feeling his auras surrounding him. 10. He let it envelop his body, sensing how his aura felt in its natural state, calm but powerful. Then, he began focusing on his Nen, gathering it into his fist. Slowly, carefully, he built it up, feeding his will into the energy. His thoughts were clear. Focus. Direct it all into this one strike. The sensation was different this time. He felt his aura constricting into a pinpoint of power, a pressure building in his fist. He opened his eyes, his gaze steely, and aimed at a large boulder in front of him. With one swift motion, Naruto released all of his energy into his punch. For a split second, there was nothing but silence. And then, with a resounding crash, the ground beneath his fist buckled. A crater formed where his punch had landed, a deep, jagged hole in the earth, the remains of the boulder scattered around him. Naruto stood back, chest heaving, his fist still outstretched in the air. A grin spread across his face as he looked down at the crater. I did it. I actually did it. It wasn't perfect, but it was the first real success he had had with Hajinkan. The power behind the strike was immense, but more importantly, it was controlled. It wasn't just a wild outburst of energy. It was a focused punch, a manifestation of everything he had learned. Naruto's excitement bubbled over as he let out a loud laugh. Yeah. That felt amazing. He balled his hand into a fist, staring at the crater as the aftershocks of his punch reverberated through the earth. But as he calmed down, the weight of his newfound power began to settle over him. This was no small thing. The strength behind Hajinten was formidable, but with such power came responsibility. The amount of energy required to use this technique was immense. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the destruction could be catastrophic. Naruto knew that he needed to be careful. Power alone wasn't enough. He had to control it, to use it wisely. His gaze softened as he looked around the forest. I have to be careful with this. It's not just about getting stronger. It's about knowing when and how to use it. Days passed as Naruto continued to train, perfecting his control over Hajinten. He experimented with different ways of releasing his aura, different stances, different methods of channeling his nen. Each attempt was a lesson, a piece of the puzzle coming together. He learned that the power of Hajinten was tied not just to his body, but to his emotions and his will. The more determined he was, the stronger the technique became. But if he allowed his emotions to overtake him, if he gave in to anger or frustration, his power would spiral out of control. It was during one of these training sessions that Naruto realized something important. He had always been a fighter, a person who thrived in battle, someone who pushed forward without hesitation. But Nen had taught him something deeper, something about balance, about finding a center. The raw power of Hajinten was magnificent, but its true strength came from the discipline and restraint that came with it. One evening, after hours of exhausting practice, Naruto sat on a large rock by a small stream, staring into the distance. His body was tired, his muscles aching, but there was a contentment within him that he hadn't felt in a long time. The stars above twinkled in a clear night sky, and the sound of the rushing water was peaceful, almost soothing. Naruto leaned back, letting out a deep sigh. I've come so far. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had a purpose beyond simply becoming the strongest or seeking recognition. With his nen, with his ability to enhance his power and now master Hajinten, Naruto was beginning to understand what true strength meant. It wasn't about overwhelming others or proving a point. It was about control, wisdom, and knowing when to strike. As he stared up at the sky, he couldn't help but wonder what other techniques awaited him in the scroll. What else did he need to learn? How much more power could he unlock? One thing was certain: this journey was far from over. There was more to discover, more to master, and more to learn. But with his newfound sense of purpose and control, Naruto felt confident that he could face whatever lay ahead. For the first time in a long while, Naruto's heart swelled with something he hadn't felt before: true determination. He wasn't just seeking strength anymore. He was seeking mastery, control, and understanding. And with that, the path of the enhancer, the path of Hajinten, and the path of Nen unfolded before him, ready to test him in ways he had yet to understand. The first time Naruto attempted to blend his chakra and Nen, it was a disaster. He had spent weeks mastering the basic concepts of both, honing his chakra control and learning the intricacies of Nen. The two systems were fundamentally different. Chakra was the life energy within every living being, while Nen was an external force, an energy that radiated from the user and could be shaped through the will. Combining the two seemed like an impossible task, but the more Naruto trained, the more he realized the potential they could offer if harnessed together. He had been sitting alone in a forest, practicing his usual chakra-based techniques, simple, everyday jutsu. But today, his mind was set on something more ambitious. He would blend his chakra with his nen. He focused his chakra first, molding it into the familiar shape of a shadow clone. Then, he began to weave his nen into the process. As the clone began to take form, he added a layer of his aura around it, concentrating hard on maintaining the balance between the two powers. The clone that appeared before him was unlike anything he had seen before. It was more solid, its presence stronger, its aura palpable. Whoa, Naruto murmured, examining the clone. It worked. But as he took a step back, the clone moved suddenly, and without warning, it exploded into a burst of energy. The force sent Naruto tumbling backward, his body hitting the ground with a thud. He groaned, staring up at the sky. The clone had been far too volatile, its Chakra and combination unstable, and it had blown apart from the sheer force. Naruto sat up slowly, wiping the dirt from his face. Okay, that didn't go as planned. Though the explosion had been jarring, it hadn't been a complete failure. The clone had been far more durable, able to withstand far more damage than his typical clones. But it had still lacked the necessary control. He needed to refine his approach, find a way to stabilize the mix of Chakra and Nen. Determined, Naruto stood up. I'm not going to give up that easily. Days turned into weeks as Naruto threw himself into perfecting the fusion of Chakra and Nen. His attempts were often chaotic, with most of his clones disappearing in blinding explosions or his aura short-circuiting in bizarre ways. He had a lot of success with simple jutsu. His shadow clones were stronger and more resilient, his transformation jutsu more defined, but the real challenge lay in using these combined energies for more advanced techniques. His first significant breakthrough came when he decided to experiment with one of his signature moves, the Raise Nan. Naruto stood in the middle of an open field, surrounded by trees that had seen their fair share of destruction. His face was set in a determined frown as he focused on his chakra. He began the familiar spinning motion, concentrating on the orb of energy that he had perfected over years of practice. But this time, instead of creating just a regular Raise Nan, he infused it with his Nen, focusing his aura into the ball of chakra. He could feel the difference immediately. The Raise Nan began to hum with a more intense energy, the surface of the orb glowing faintly as the Nen began to blend with the chakra. He had read about this potential how Nen could enhance chakra techniques by increasing their destructive potential. The scroll described it as the amplification of intent, a way of feeding the power of Nen into the purpose of the chakra. Naruto grinned as he watched the Raise Nan spin, feeling the rush of energy surge through his hands. This was it. With one powerful thrust, he would test it. He charged forward, thrusting the Raise Nan toward a large boulder at the edge of the field. The moment the Raise Nan made contact, the world around him seemed to freeze. The sheer force of the combined energies was overwhelming. The boulder shattered, the explosion echoing through the forest, and the shockwave sent trees crashing to the ground. The resulting dust cloud enveloped the area, making it impossible for Naruto to see anything. He stood, panting, heart racing as he tried to assess the damage. After a few moments, the dust began to settle. Naruto's vision cleared, and he stared at the smoldering remnants of the boulder. What had once been a large rock now lay in pieces, reduced to nothing but jagged fragments scattered across the ground. But that wasn't what caught Naruto's attention. What stood out was the fact that the area around the impact had been completely devastated. The earth had been torn apart, and a deep crater had formed in the center. Whoa, Naruto whispered to himself, feeling both excitement and a slight twinge of fear. He had never seen his Raise Nan so powerful. The combination of chakra and Nen had amplified its power to a degree he hadn't anticipated. He could feel his heart pounding with the thrill of his success, but also the weight of what he had done. This kind of power, this kind of destruction, wasn't something to take lightly. Okay, that was amazing, but I have to be careful with this, he muttered, looking around at the devastated landscape. His first attempt had been successful, but the amount of energy he had expended had been immense. He was left breathless, and the exhaustion from his earlier training added to the toll. The balance between chakra and Nen was delicate, and he had to learn how to control it better. Over the next few weeks, Naruto continued experimenting with his newly enhanced Raise Nan, refining his technique and improving his control. At first, every attempt felt like walking a tightrope. A single misstep, and he risked destroying everything around him. But the more he practiced, the more comfortable he became with the combination of powers. He began experimenting with different forms of Raise Nan, adjusting the amount of Nen he infused into each one. Some were more concentrated, producing small but devastating explosions. Others were larger and more controlled, capable of obliterating a vast area with precision. Slowly, he developed a new technique, a hybrid form he dubbed the aura-infused Nen. This technique allowed Naruto to maintain a stronger, more stable Nen, one that used the principles of Nen to enhance the potency of the chakra while keeping it under control. He could now use it in quick bursts, unleashing its power in precise moments instead of relying on raw, unrestrained energy. This was the key to mastering the fusion of Chakra and Nen. Naruto's confidence grew as he learned to maintain this balance. His aura-infused Nen became a fearsome tool, one that could easily defeat foes with overwhelming force while also giving him the precision needed to avoid collateral damage. He had become more than just a powerful shinobi, he was learning how to wield his strength wisely. One evening, after another long training session, Naruto sat by the small campfire he had built in the woods. His body was sore, and his mind tired, but there was a sense of satisfaction in the air. His training had paid off. He had not only merged two completely different sources of power, Chakra and Nen, but had also learned how to balance them in a way that made him more formidable than ever. As the fire crackled, Naruto stared into the flames, deep in thought. He had come so far in such a short time. What else was out there waiting for him? How much more could he learn? He had always dreamed of becoming the greatest shinobi, of earning the respect of his village and proving his worth. But now, with the power of Nen at his disposal, that dream seemed so much closer and yet, so much farther away. The path he had chosen was one of both tremendous power and grave responsibility. Naruto clenched his fist, his resolve hardening like steel. He had always been an outsider, always fighting to prove himself. But now, with the fusion of Chakra and Nen, he was no longer just a student. He was a force to be reckoned with. And though he had learned to control his power, he knew that this was only the beginning. There was so much more to explore, so many more techniques to master, and so many challenges ahead. The sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the sounds of the chirping crickets, signaling the approach of evening. Naruto was focused on his training, sweat dripping down his brow as he molded his chakra into the shape of a Nen. But this time, he was adding more than just his usual chakra, he was fusing his Nen into the ball of energy, allowing the two forces to blend together in a harmonious surge of power. His hands shook slightly from the effort as the Nen began to spin, its surface glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. The power coursed through him, the combined chakra and Nen giving it a dangerous vibrancy. He'd been perfecting this technique for weeks, and it was starting to feel almost natural, as though the two energies were no longer severed but part of him, as much a part of his being as his own heartbeat. But even as he focused on a swirling orb, he felt a strange presence nearby, one that didn't belong to the wind or the trees. It was the faintest shift in the air, a subtle change in the atmosphere. He stopped, the Nen flickering out of existence as he instinctively dropped into a defensive stance. "Who's there?" Naruto called out, his eyes scanning the dimming forest. There was no answer at first, just the rustle of leaves. But then, through the trees, a figure emerged, one that Naruto instantly recognized. Hinata. She was standing at the edge of the clearing, her usual gentle demeanor replaced by something more serious, her expression a mixture of surprise and awe. Her long hair flowed loosely behind her, and her lavender eyes were wide as she took in the remnants of the power Naruto had just unleashed. Naruto's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't sensed her approach, hadn't felt her presence until she was right there, watching him. His mind raced. How long has she been here? What did she see? He quickly tried to compose himself, brushing his hands against his pants in a faint casual manner. Hinata, what are you doing here? He asked, his voice not as steady as he had hoped. Hinata didn't immediately respond. She seemed almost mesmerized by the clearing in front of her, where the ground had been scorched by the intense energy of Naruto's Nen. She took a few tentative steps forward, her gaze lingering on the area where the explosion had occurred. "Naruto," she finally said, her voice soft but steady. "That was incredible. You've become so strong." Naruto felt a flush of warmth spread across his face, unsure how to react to her praise. He hadn't exactly expected her to be so calm about the sheer destructive power he had just unleashed. After all, most people would have run away in fear or called for help. But not Hinata. She was standing there, looking at him like she had just witnessed something amazing. "Yeah, well, I've been working on it," he replied, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "But, I don't think you're supposed to see all this. It's not exactly something I've told anyone about yet." Hinata's eyes met his, and for a moment, Naruto was struck by the sincerity in her gaze. She wasn't judging him, wasn't afraid. Instead, she was curious, like she wanted to understand what he had done. "I've been watching you," she confessed, stepping closer. "For a while now. I noticed you've been training harder than usual. I didn't know what you were doing at first, but now I see." Her eyes shifted to the ground, then back to him. "I don't think you're just using chakra anymore. There's something else there." Naruto's heart skipped again. He swallowed, struggling to find the words. He had always been careful to keep his Nen abilities a secret. The last thing he wanted was for anyone to get the wrong idea or misunderstand the power he was wielding. But as he looked at Hinata, something inside him told him that she wasn't like the others. She wasn't going to turn away from him or see him as a threat. No, Hinata had always been different. With a deep breath, Naruto lowered his guard, his voice quieter now. "You're right. It's not just chakra. It's called Nen. It's a whole other kind of energy. And I've been learning how to use it. It's a long story, but it's how I've gotten stronger." Hinata blinked, processing his words. "Nen?" Naruto nodded, running a hand through his hair nervously. "Yeah. It's kind of like chakra, but it's not the same. It's an energy that surrounds all living things, and I've been learning how to control it, how to use it to make my chakra stronger. I wasn't sure if I should tell anyone about it. I've kept it a secret because, well, I didn't want anyone to think I was some kind of freak or a danger to the village." Hinata took another step closer, her expression softening. "Naruto, you're not a freak. You've always been strong, and this is just another part of that strength. I think it's amazing, what you've been doing. You're not a danger to anyone. You're trying to protect them, aren't you?" Naruto looked down, his heart swelling at her words. He had always struggled to see himself as someone worthy of praise or admiration. The villagers had always treated him like an outcast, like something to fear. Even now, despite all his accomplishments and growth, he felt the weight of that isolation pressing against him. But Hinata had always seen him for who he really was. He smiled faintly, a warmth blossoming in his chest. "Yeah. I just want to protect everyone, and be recognized for what I've done." Hinata's gaze was unwavering, her voice gentle but firm. "I believe in you, Naruto. And I promise, I won't tell anyone. Your secret is safe with me." There was a moment of silence, and then, Naruto felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of connection, of not being alone in this journey. It wasn't just about the power he had gained, the techniques he had mastered. It was about the trust he was beginning to place in someone else. He let out a small laugh, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thanks, Hinata. I really appreciate that." She smiled at him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Naruto felt truly seen. Not as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, not as the troublemaker who had to fight for recognition. But as Naruto. As someone who was learning, growing, and becoming something greater than he had ever imagined. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he had to hide his true self from anyone. Over the following weeks, Naruto and Hinata began to spend more time together, training in the forest and practicing their respective techniques. Hinata, who had always been quiet and reserved, seemed to open up more around Naruto. She shared stories about her own struggles, about her training under her father, and how she had always felt like she was falling short of expectations. Naruto, in turn, shared his challenges, his fears, and the weight of the powers he was learning to control. Through it all, they found a bond that went beyond just their abilities. They were two people who had always felt like outsiders, and now, together, they didn't have to feel alone anymore. As Naruto's powers continued to grow, so did his relationship with Hinata. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper, something Naruto had never dared to hope for. He trusted her completely, and she trusted him just as much. It was a rare and precious connection, one that neither of them had ever expected to find, but both were grateful for. And in the back of his mind, as Naruto continued to train, he couldn't shake the thought that, with Hinata by his side, he might finally have the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead, not just as a shinobi, but as someone who had a future, a purpose, and a place where he truly belonged. The air inside the Chunin exam arena was thick with tension. The large coliseum was filled to the brim with spectators, each of them eagerly awaiting the battle between Konoha's young genin. Naruto Uzumaki stood at one end of the arena, his eyes focused on his opponent. The roaring crowd felt like a distant hum in his ears as he narrowed his gaze at Kaiba Inyazuka, who stood on the opposite side. Kaiba was well known for his speed and ferocity, his canine companion Akamaru always by his side. But today, Naruto felt something different. Something within him had been awakened. The culmination of months of training with Nen, combined with his natural chakra control, had brought him to this moment. Kaiba grinned confidently, his sharp teeth gleaming. "You're not going to win this, Naruto. I have got Akamaru in my speed. There's no way you can keep up." He cracked his knuckles, clearly expecting a straightforward victory. Naruto, however, had no intention of underestimating him. The battle to come was as much about testing his new powers as it was about proving to everyone, especially himself, that he could win. The past years of loneliness, of being underestimated, and of struggling for recognition, all led to this moment. Now, he would show the world just how far he had come. The match began with a traditional signal from the proctor, and Kaiba wasted no time charging forward with Akamaru by his side. The dog leapt with impressive speed, and Kaiba followed close behind, aiming for Naruto's flag. But Naruto wasn't the same naive genin he had been when he first entered the academy. His senses were sharpened, his reflexes heightened by the power of Nen coursing through him. Naruto focused, his aura expanding around him like a protective cocoon. He could feel Kaiba's presence long before he saw the Inyazuka rush forward. Without hesitation, Naruto shifted his stance and prepared to meet Kaiba's attack head-on. When Kaiba was mere inches away, Naruto activated his enhanced speed, moving like a blur. He sidestepped Kaiba's strike, his body flowing effortlessly with the momentum. Akamaru, attempting to circle him, was met with a swift kick that sent him skidding backward, howling in surprise. Kaiba, momentarily thrown off balance, growled, "What the hell? You're faster than you look." Naruto smirked, his confidence growing. "I've been practicing, Kaiba. A lot of things you don't know about." He raised his hand, readying himself for what was to come next. Kaiba's eyes flashed with determination as he charged again, but this time, Naruto was ready. With a quick motion, he focused both his chakra and Nen into his fist. The air seemed to crackle as his aura surged. He had been saving this move for the right moment. "Hajinten Rock!" Naruto shouted, the words barely escaping his lips before he swung his arm forward with all his strength. The force of the punch was so overwhelming that the ground beneath Naruto's feet cracked, and the air itself seemed to riddle from the power behind it. Kaiba had no time to react. The punch landed squarely in his chest, sending him flying through the air like a ragdoll. The force propelled him all the way across the arena, crashing into the wall with a deafening thud. The crowd fell silent. There was no cheering, no gasps of disbelief, just an eerie, heavy silence. For a moment, the only sound was the soft echo of Kaiba's body hitting the arena wall. Naruto stood in the center of the field, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. He had never used Hajinten with this much force before. The sheer impact of his punch was far beyond what he had anticipated. Kaiba struggled to get back to his feet, his breathing ragged. He coughed up blood, his face contorted with pain, but there was a defiance in his eyes. "I'm not finished yet, Naruto," he growled, though the determination in his voice lacked its usual fervor. The proctor, who had been watching the exchange closely, immediately called for the medics to take Kaiba away. It was clear the Inuzuka had been defeated. But Naruto wasn't focusing on Kaiba now. He was still processing the power of his own attack. The sensation of Nen and Chakra flowing together was more than just a simple technique. It was like an extension of himself, his spirit made manifest in the form of raw energy. And with that power, he had just defeated one of the strongest genin in Konoha. As Kaiba was escorted off the field, the crowd erupted into applause, their cheers loud and excited. Naruto didn't react to their admiration, his thoughts were elsewhere. This is just the beginning. The next battle is going to be even harder. His opponent in the final round was none other than Neji Hyuga, a genius of the Hyuga clan with a reputation for his unbeatable Bikudan and unyielding combat style. The rest of the Chunin exams passed in a blur, with Naruto's mind focused entirely on his upcoming battle with Neji. He knew that Neji was on an entirely different level, and to defeat him, he would need more than just raw power. He would need to be strategic, combining his Nen and Chakra in ways he hadn't fully explored. The final round, Naruto vs. Neji. The day of the final battle arrived with a heavy air of anticipation. The arena was packed once more, but this time, Naruto's heart pounded for an entirely different reason. He was facing Neji Hyuga, one of the most skilled and well-respected shinobi in Konoha. Neji's reputation as a prodigy was no joke, and Naruto could feel the weight of that expectation pressing down on him. Neji stepped into the arena with his usual calm demeanor, his Bikudan activated, glowing faintly beneath his pale eyes. He looked at Naruto with a certain coldness, his expression unreadable. "You've done well to make it this far, Naruto," Neji said, his voice measured and calm. "But this is where it ends. You may be strong, but you can't match the power of my Bikugan." Naruto didn't respond right away. Instead, he focused on Neji, his senses heightened. He could feel the delicate flow of chakra beneath Neji's skin, the pathways of his Tenketsu points weaknesses that could be exploited, but only if Naruto could find a way to counter Neji's near-perfect defense. "You may be able to see everything, Neji," Naruto said finally, "but I don't think you can see everything that's coming." Neji's expression shifted slightly, but he didn't respond. Instead, he activated his gentle fist technique, the air seeming to hum with energy as he prepared to strike. The battle began with a blur of movement, Neji's strikes coming faster than the eye could follow. Naruto dodged and weaved, his enhanced speed and agility allowing him to avoid Neji's rapid attacks. The Bikudan granted Neji near-perfect vision, making it difficult for Naruto to land a hit. But Naruto wasn't relying solely on his physical strength anymore. He drew upon his Nen, gathering it around him like an invisible shield. His aura flared, pushing Neji's strikes away just enough to prevent the gentle but precise blows from landing. The fight raged on, Neji's strikes relentless, but Naruto was beginning to understand the flow of the battle. Neji's Bikudan allowed him to predict movements, but Naruto's Nen was unpredictable, shifting and changing in ways Neji couldn't quite anticipate. It wasn't just about chakra or physical strength anymore, it was about mastery over his own energy. Naruto saw an opening. Neji was focusing too much on his defensive stance, preparing for a critical blow. With a roar, Naruto thrust his hand forward, charging up a raised Nen infused with Nen, a technique he had been perfecting for weeks. The blue sphere glowed with an intense, otherworldly light as it crackled with raw energy. "Aura-infused raised Nen?" Naruto shouted, and with all the force he could muster, he hurled a ball of energy straight at Neji. Neji's Bikudan detected the attack, and he immediately activated his defense, preparing to deflect it. But the force of the raised Nen, amplified by Naruto's Nen, was too much. It exploded upon contact, creating a shockwave that sent Neji stumbling back, struggling to regain his footing. The crowd gasped in disbelief as Neji fell to the ground, his body bruised and exhausted from the attack. Naruto stood, panting heavily but victorious, his heart racing from the adrenaline. For the first time in his life, he had used every part of himself to win. He hadn't just defeated Neji's physical prowess, he had broken through his mental and spiritual defenses. As the proctor called the match in his favor, Naruto's eyes met Hinata's in the crowd. She was smiling at him, pride shining in her eyes. And in that moment, Naruto knew this was only the beginning of his journey, not just as a shinobi, but as someone who had finally found his place in the world. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the lush landscapes of the Land of Fire. Naruto Uzumaki stood atop a cliff, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He had spent most of his life yearning for recognition, for a place where he could prove himself. Now, after winning the Chunin exams and awakening new powers within himself, he felt a sense of urgency, as if his journey had only just begun. The time had come for him to grow even stronger. His victory had drawn the attention of the higher UBS in Kanata, and it wasn't long before Jiraiya the legendary's son offered to take Naruto on a training journey. It was an offer that Naruto couldn't refuse, and he was eager to see what new challenges awaited him. Little did he know, this journey would reshape him in ways he could never have imagined. Naruto's first few days under Jiraiya's tutelage were challenging, to say the least. Jiraiya, though impressed by Naruto's abilities, was skeptical of the power Naruto had gained through Nen. As someone who had spent his life mastering chakra, the concept of Nen was foreign to him. Still, he couldn't ignore the evidence before him. Naruto was stronger than ever, and his abilities were unlike anything Jiraiya had seen before. "All right, kid," Jiraiya said, his voice booming as he gestured to the open field. "We're going to start with the basics. You've got the Raise Nen down, but we need to refine it. You're going to combine that with your new Nen abilities, but you need to be careful. If you lose control of that power, things could get messy." Naruto nodded, determination in his eyes. He had always struggled with balancing his chakra, and now he had to add this foreign energy to the mix. But he had come a long way from the days when he couldn't even control a single chakra flow. With his Nen abilities, he felt an overwhelming power coursing through him, but he knew he couldn't let it control him. He had to find balance. They spent hours each day training, Jiraiya focusing on refining Naruto's chakra control, while Naruto continued to integrate his Nen. At first, it was a struggle. Every time he tried to infuse the Raise Nen with Nen, the result was either too weak or too powerful. Sometimes, he would end up collapsing from the strain of balancing both energies. But slowly, through trial and error, Naruto began to master the delicate balance. On one particular afternoon, as the sun began to set, Naruto focused all his energy into a single Raise Nen. He could feel the familiar hum of chakras swirling within him, but now, he could also sense the pulse of his Nen, a deeper, more primal energy. He combined the two with a sharp focus, channeling both forces into his palm. The result was immediate. The Raise Nen swirled and expanded, glowing with an intense, otherworldly light. It was as if the Raise Nen was no longer just chakra, it was alive, infused with the raw power of Naruto's Nen. The sphere hovered above his hand, crackling with energy, and Naruto could feel its weight. He knew this was different from any Raise Nen he had ever made before. This was something far more destructive. "Not bad, Naruto," Jiraiya said, his voice tinged with awe. "You've really done it. This is something else. You've integrated your Nen into the Raise Nen seamlessly." Naruto smiled, a bead of sweat trickling down his brow. "I still need a lot of work, but I can feel it, Jiraiya. This power, it's like nothing I've ever experienced. I feel stronger than ever." Jiraiya gave him a thoughtful look. "That's good, kid. But don't forget, power without control is dangerous. We need to make sure you can use that power without destroying yourself in the process." As the days turned into weeks, Naruto's training progressed at an astonishing rate. Jiraiya, once doubtful of Nen's usefulness, began to see the potential of combining chakra and Nen. Under Jiraiya's watchful eye, Naruto mastered advanced chakra techniques, like the Shadow Clone Jutsu, and infused them with his Nen. The results were staggering. His clones were now more durable and could use Nen-enhanced attacks, making them far more effective in combat. But it wasn't just about fighting. Jiraiya also emphasized the importance of developing Naruto's leadership abilities. As a future Hokage, Naruto needed to be more than just a powerful warrior. He had to learn how to inspire others, to make decisions with a clear mind, and to lead with wisdom. They traveled across the land, seeking out hidden masters of Chakra and Nen alike. Some were reluctant to teach, wary of Naruto's newfound power, but Jiraiya was persuasive, and Naruto's sincerity won them over. With each master they encountered, Naruto learned something new, whether it was an advanced Nen technique, a chakra-based strategy, or a lesson in leadership. Through these lessons, Naruto began to shape his identity, understanding that his true strength lay not just in his power, but in his ability to guide others. One evening, as they sat by a campfire, Jiraiya looked at Naruto with a contemplative expression. The flames flickered in his eyes, and the silence between them was comfortable. For the first time in a long while, Jiraiya saw something different in Naruto. It wasn't just the raw strength or the mastery of his abilities that was a quiet confidence, a maturity that had taken root in him during their travels. "You've come a long way, kid," Jiraiya said, his voice unusually soft. "I can see it in the way you fight, in the way you think. You've got the heart of a Hokage. But the journey's not over yet. You've got a long way to go before you're ready for that responsibility." Naruto looked at him, his expression serious. "I know, Jiraiya. But I'm ready. I've got the power now, and I won't stop until I can protect everyone I care about. I'm not going to let anyone down." Jiraiya chuckled, shaking his head. "That's the spirit. Just don't forget that you don't have to do it alone. There are people who care about you. Don't push them away, okay?" Naruto nodded silently, feeling the weight of Jiraiya's words. For so long, he had felt isolated, alone in his pursuit of strength. But now, surrounded by those who cared for him like Jiraiya, like Hinata, he realized that true strength wasn't just about power. It was about the bonds he forged along the way. The months flew by as Naruto's training journey continued. He mastered new Nen techniques, pushing his limits further with each passing day. He learned to manipulate his aura in more complex ways, using it to enhance his senses, boost his endurance, and even influence the environment around him. But no matter how strong he became, he knew that he had only scratched the surface of what was possible. One fateful night, as Naruto stood atop a mountain peak, looking out at the vast expanse below, he made a promise to himself. "I won't stop. I'll keep growing, keep fighting. No matter what it takes, I'll protect Hinata, protect my friends, and become the Hokage they all believe I can be." And as the wind howled through the trees, Naruto felt a surge of determination unlike any he had ever known. The journey ahead would be difficult, fraught with dangers and challenges, but he was ready. With the combined power of Chakra and Nen, and the guidance of Jiraiya, he would face whatever came his way. Naruto's journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. And as the stars above him glittered like distant promises, he knew that his destiny, his true path, was waiting for him. The crisp wind rustled the leaves in a dense forest as Naruto and Jiraiya made their way along a secluded path. The distant sounds of nature, normally soothing, felt like an ominous warning today. The feeling of unease hung in the air like a thick fog. Naruto's senses, sharpened by his training, picked up on the subtle signs: too quiet, too still, something was wrong. Jiraiya, walking ahead, glanced over his shoulder. "Keep your guard up, Naruto. We've been on a move for a while, and I've got a feeling we're not alone." Naruto nodded, his eyes narrowing. The Akatsuki, those shadowy figures that had been causing turmoil across the land, had been on his mind lately. He had heard about their ruthless pursuit of powerful tail beasts, including the 9 tails sealed inside him. The possibility of encountering them had always loomed in the back of his mind, and now it seemed like that moment was drawing closer. As they continued, the path ahead became increasingly narrow, the trees closing in around them. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Naruto's eye, followed by a chilling voice. Well, what do we have here?" Out from behind the trees stepped 2 figures, one tall and imposing, with shark-like features, wielding a massive sword, and the other, a man with long, dark hair and a calm, almost detached expression. The moment they appeared, Naruto felt the weight of their presence, like a predator stalking its prey. Hisame Hashidaki and Atake Uchiha. Jiraiya's face hardened as he assessed the situation. Akatsuki, he muttered under his breath. This isn't going to be easy. Naruto tensed, his mind immediately assessing the threat. He had heard of Kisane's strength. His massive sword, Hinata, was notorious for its power to absorb chakra. And Atake, the name alone sent shivers down his spine. A member of the Uchiha clan, a man who had single-handedly wiped out his entire family. His eyes, the Sharingan, were feared by all who encountered them. Kisane grinned, his teeth sharp and predatory. You're that brat, Naruto, hey? The one with the 9 tails sealed inside him. You've grown strong, but let's see how strong you really are. Without warning, Kisane lunged forward, his sword swinging in a wide arc toward Naruto, his immense strength sending the blade crashing toward him with terrifying speed. But Naruto was ready. A surge of Chakra and Nen flooded his body. His hands flew through seals, his body blurring with speed as he focused on the energy he had been refining for months. With a powerful burst, he activated Kill, pushing his aura to the limit. His body was enveloped in a glowing shield of aura, a defensive barrier that absorbed the force of Kisane's attack. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered as Kisane's sword collided with Naruto's protective shield. The force of the strike reverberated through the air, but Naruto remained rooted in place. The power of Kill, the advanced technique to increase his aura's output, formed an impenetrable wall between him and his opponent. Impressive, Kisane growled, his grin widening. But let's see how long you can keep that up, kid. Jiraiya, standing at a distance, watched intently. Be careful, Naruto, he called. Kisane's strength isn't just physical, he's got a chakra-draining sword, Hinata. It'll be tough to keep up that defense for long. Naruto gritted his teeth, but the information wasn't new to him. He had prepared for this. His battle with Kisane wasn't just about raw strength. It was about strategy. As Kisane took another swing, Naruto focused his energy, shifting his stance. His Kill began to expand, amplifying his aura, while his chakra flared as he simultaneously prepared a counterattack. He wasn't just defending, he was plotting. The next strike came faster, but this time, Naruto was ready. With a burst of speed, he dodged to the side, using the momentum of his Nen-enhanced agility to avoid Kisane's attack. His hand shot out in a blur, and with a single, precise strike, he unleashed an unboosted Hajinkan, rock straight at Kisane's exposed side. Kisane's eyes widened in surprise as the attack slammed into him with the force of a freight train. The ground beneath him buckled, sending dirt and debris flying as Kisane was sent hurtling backward, crashing into the trees with an audible thud. Damn brat! Kisane growled, spitting blood as he picked himself up. His eyes glowed with a dangerous gleam, and he swung Hinata into the ground, charging toward Naruto once more. You're a lot more than I expected. But Naruto wasn't done. His eyes gleamed with determination, his aura crackling with power. He had grown far stronger since their last encounter. He wasn't going to let this chance slip by. Before Kisane could close the distance, Naruto focused all his Nen into his legs and took to the air, leaping high above the battlefield. In that moment, he saw everything: the shifting patterns of his opponents, the terrain, and the battle's rhythm. With pinpoint precision, he twisted in mid-air, positioning himself above Kisane. He could feel the balance of Chakra and Nen shifting within him, and with a final yell, Naruto released his aura-infused Raise Nen. It tore through the air, whistling with destructive energy as it plummeted toward Kisane. The immense power of the Raise Nen, now enhanced with his Nen, created a shockwave that forced the very air to bend and ripple. Kisane barely managed to dodge, but the attack was too much. The ground where he had been standing erupted in a violent explosion, sending dirt and debris scattering across the battlefield. At that moment, Itachi stepped forward, his Sharingan eyes glowing. He was silent, calculating, and his gaze locked onto Naruto. Jiraiya's voice was urgent. Naruto, watch out. That's Itachi Uchiha. His Sharingan can control your mind if you are not careful. Naruto's heart raced as he faced Itachi, the legendary Uchiha. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, but he wasn't going to back down. This was his chance to prove his strength not just to Jiraiya, or even to Konoha but to himself. With his Nen and Chakra flowing in perfect harmony, Naruto prepared for the next move. Itachi's eyes seemed to pierce through his defenses, but Naruto wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of controlling him. He would fight with everything he had. Itachi's voice, as smooth as ever, cut through the tension. You're stronger than I anticipated, Naruto. But you must realize that strength alone won't save you. You cannot outrun fate. In a flash, Itachi activated his Sharingan, and Naruto felt a wave of pressure crash down on him. The world seemed to slow, and his vision blurred, his mind beginning to cloud as Itachi's genjutsu tried to take hold. But Naruto's training, the mental discipline he had developed through months of honing his Nen, proved invaluable. Naruto fought back the fog, his mind focused and sharp. His Nen, the willpower behind it, acted like a shield against Itachi's influence. He could feel the mental assault trying to worm its way into his mind, but with a burst of willpower, he pushed back. In an instant, Naruto broke free of the genjutsu's grasp. He gritted his teeth, the power of his aura flaring once more as he charged at Itachi, striking with a brutal aura-infused Nen. The attack was faster than ever before, a perfect blend of Chakra and Nen. Itachi, caught off guard by the sheer speed and intensity, raised his hand in defense. The Nen collided with his defense, causing a shockwave that shook the entire forest. But Itachi, ever the master of control, quickly regained his composure. Impressive, he said, his voice barely a whisper. But it is not enough. Kisame, who had been recovering, let out a growl. Enough of this. It's clear that Brat has more power than we expected. But we've seen enough. As they began to retreat, Itachi's cold gaze lingered on Naruto for a moment longer. This isn't over, Naruto. You'll learn that the true cost of power is never what you expect. And with that, the two Akatsuki members vanished into the shadows, leaving Naruto and Jiraiya standing in the aftermath of the battle. Naruto stood still, his breathing heavy as the adrenaline slowly faded. He could feel the strain in his body from the battle, but his mind was already analyzing what had happened. He had won this round, but it was clear that he had only scratched the surface of what the Akatsuki could do. Jiraiya placed a hand on his shoulder, a rare expression of approval on his face. You did well, Naruto. But don't get cocky. That was just the beginning. Naruto nodded, his resolve hardening. I know. But next time, I'll be ready for them. The battle with Kisame and Itachi had taught him many things, chief among them that power alone was not enough. He needed more control, more experience, and perhaps, even more allies. As they continued their journey, Naruto knew that the encounter with Akatsuki was far from over. But he was ready. Whatever came next, he would face it head on. And with that, the road ahead seemed less uncertain than ever. The village gates of Konoha loomed large before Naruto as he approached with Jiraiya at his side. The familiar sight of the Hokage monument in the distance brought a sense of nostalgia to his heart, but also a strange tension. His journey had taken him far from home, to places he never imagined, and through battles that had tested not only his physical limits but also his very soul. Now, he was returning, not just as a son of the village, but as someone completely different, stronger, wiser, and more powerful than anyone had expected. As the gates creaked open, a wave of anticipation washed over him. The villagers who had once shunned him, feared him, or simply ignored his existence, now watched with wide eyes. Some greeted him with quiet reverence, others with curiosity, but no one could deny the aura of power that surrounded him. Naruto's heart pounded in his chest. He had always longed for recognition, but now that it was finally here, it felt strange, almost alien. The power he wielded, the mastery of both Chakra and Nen, was beyond anything the village had ever seen. But power came with a price, and that thought lingered in his mind as he made his way down the streets of Kanata. "Here we are," Jiraiya said, his tone both proud and cautious. "You're home. It's been a while." Naruto nodded. "Yeah, it's been a long time. I never really knew what it would feel like to come back, but this time, it's different." "Indeed," Jiraiya replied, eyes scanning the village. "You're not the same kid who left, Naruto. You've grown. But don't let that power consume you. Remember, there's more to being a hero than just strength." Naruto gave a quiet smile, but inside, the weight of Jiraiya's words felt heavier than ever. He had changed, but would the village accept this new version of him? Could he live up to the expectations that would surely follow? As they walked, Naruto's thoughts were interrupted by the appearance of his old friend Shizuke, Sakura, and Kakashi, who had been waiting for him near the Hokage office. "Boy, Naruto?" Shizuke called out, his tone as cool and detached as always. But there was something different in his eyes' respect. "You've been gone for a while. I didn't think you'd come back this strong." Naruto's grin widened, the old rivalry still alive in his chest. "I told you, Shizuke. I'd catch up to you someday." Shizuke raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Instead, he glanced at Naruto's form with renewed interest, sensing the immense energy that radiated from him. He didn't need to be told that Naruto had surpassed his previous limits. "Impressive," Sakura said softly, her voice filled with a mix of admiration and surprise. She had always believed in Naruto, but seeing the extent of his power was something else entirely. "You're not the same Naruto we knew." Naruto turned to her, his expression serious for a moment. "I had to change. I wasn't going to keep running from my past, or from my future." Kakashi stepped forward, the usual gleam in his eye replaced by something more reflective. "I've seen many great warriors, Naruto. But I've never seen someone with the ability to wield both chakra and nen so seamlessly. You've grown stronger than I ever imagined." Naruto's heart swelled with pride, but he didn't let it show. He had trained hard, pushing himself to new limits, not just for his own sake, but for the village he loved. For the people who had been there for him when it mattered most. And for the people who hadn't, who had shunned him and branded him a monster, he would show them that he was more than just a nine-tails. "So, what now?" Shizuke asked, breaking the silence that had fallen over the group. "What's your next move?" Naruto's gaze hardened as he looked toward the Hokage's office. "I'm going to help protect Konoha. Whatever comes next, I'll be ready." Sakura nodded, her expression softening. "You're not alone in this, Naruto. We're all here for you." Naruto felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. Despite the overwhelming power he had gained, it was the relationships he had built with his friends and his village that truly mattered. Later that day, Naruto stood before the Hokage's office, waiting for the meeting to begin. He could feel the weight of the Hokage's eyes on him as Tsunade stepped out from behind the doors. She had always been a woman of few words, but Naruto could sense her strength and resolve, something that was no different now, even with the knowledge of his new abilities. "You've returned," Tsunade said, her tone firm but not unkind. "And you've grown stronger. I can sense the power within you. Chakra and Nen, combining them is no small feat. What you've done is beyond what I could have imagined." Naruto felt a sense of pride, but he also knew the responsibility that came with his newfound strength. "I've learned a lot, Tsunade-sama. But I know this power comes with a cost. I'm ready to take on whatever comes, to protect Konoha." Tsunade studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes calculating. "You've always had the heart of a protector, Naruto. But there's more to this power than you realize. You can't let it control you. Not everyone will see you the way your friends do. There will be enemies who will seek to exploit your abilities." Naruto nodded. He had thought about this before, about the dangers of his power, about the enemies who would inevitably come after him. But he had already made up his mind. He would protect Konoha, no matter the cost. "I understand," he said. I won't let this power consume me. But I'll make sure no one threatens this village. Not while I'm here. Tsunade's gaze softened slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I'm glad to hear that. We could use someone like you in Kanata. But remember, strength isn't everything. Leadership, wisdom, compassion, those are the traits that will truly make you a hero. Naruto bowed his head. I'll keep that in mind, Tsunade-sama. The conversation ended with a mutual understanding. Tsunade saw the potential in him, and while she was cautious about his growth, she also recognized that Naruto was more than just the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. He had become something greater. He had become a protector in his own right, a force to be reckoned with. As the days passed, Naruto's presence in Konoha became undeniable. The villagers who had once feared him now watched with admiration as he worked alongside the Hokage and the other ninja to protect the village. He had earned their respect, but there were still those who whispered behind his back, unsure of what to make of the power he now wielded. But for Naruto, the true test wasn't the recognition he received. It was the bonds he had forged with his friends and allies. They had seen his struggle, his pain, and his growth. And that, to him, meant more than anything else. One evening, after a long day of training and mission work, Naruto stood on top of the Hokage monument, looking out over the village he had fought so hard to protect. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the rooftops and the streets below. Sakura, Sasuke, and Kakashi joined him, standing in silence as they took in the view. It felt as if the weight of the world had lifted, even if only for a moment. Naruto smiled, a rare and genuine smile that reached his eyes. I did it, he whispered. I finally did it. Kakashi placed a hand on his shoulder. You've come a long way, Naruto. But remember, this is just the beginning. The world is full of challenges, and you can't face them alone. Naruto nodded. He understood. The road ahead would be long and fraught with dangers. But with his friends by his side and a village behind him, he was ready for whatever came next. For the first time in his life, Naruto Uzumaki felt truly at home. And so, with his heart full of hope and determination, Naruto embraced the future, one that was no longer defined by his past or the nine tails sealed inside him. He had carved his own path, and he would continue to walk it, side by side with his friends, with a village that had once feared him. And together, they would face whatever the world had in store. The journey to the Five Kage summit was unlike any other Naruto had ever embarked upon. He had seen the faces of many powerful shinobi, but the Kage were a different breed altogether, men and women whose decisions shaped the fates of entire nations. Now, he was standing at the crossroads between his past as the village outcast and his future as a potential leader, as the eyes of the most powerful shinobi in the world were upon him. Naruto had been invited to the summit not just as the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, but as something more, as symbol of unprecedented power. With his mastery of both Chakra and Nen, his abilities far exceeded those of any other shinobi in Kanata, or anywhere else for that matter. As he entered the grand hall where the Five Kage sat in their seats of authority, he couldn't help but feel the weight of their scrutiny. The room was quiet, with only the soft rustle of the wind outside stirring the air. At the far end, sitting in a grand chair adorned with intricate carvings, was Tsunade, the Hokage of Kanata. Next to her, in his usual stoic manner, was Kakashi Hatake, the sixth Hokage. To the right of Tsunade sat the other Kage, Gaara, the Kazekage of the sand, Alnaki, the Tsuchikage of the stone, Meiterumi, the Mizukage of the mist, and the Raikage of the cloud. Naruto's eyes met each of theirs in turn, noting the expressions on their faces, some cautious, some intrigued, but all with an underlying sense of calculation. They knew his power. They had heard rumors and seen the results of his actions, but now, they would measure him in person. Tsunade stood first, her strong presence commanding attention. Naruto Uzumaki, she began, her voice filled with authority, you have been summoned here for one reason, to gauge your strength and determine your place in the future of the shinobi world. Naruto stood tall, meeting her gaze without flinching. I'm ready, Tsunade-sama, he said with conviction, his voice steady but carrying a weight of his own. I've worked hard to get here, and I know what's at stake. I won't back down. The Rikage, a man built like a tank with a sharp glare, leaned forward. I've heard rumors of your power, Naruto. Chakra and Nen combined, a dangerous combination. How do we know we can trust you with such strength? Naruto glanced at the Rikage, his eyes unyielding. I don't expect you to trust me blindly. I know I've got a long way to go to prove myself. But I'm not the same kid who left Konoha. I've got my friends, my village, and my duty to protect this world. That's what matters. A grunted, clearly not convinced. Protecting the world is one thing. Controlling that power is another. You're a ticking time bomb, boy. You might be too dangerous to be left unchecked. Enough, Tsunade interjected, her voice firm and commanding. We're here to assess Naruto, not to start a confrontation. The Rikage didn't take his eyes off Naruto, his suspicion still evident, but he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Oniki, the Tsuchikage, adjusted his glasses and spoke in a gravelly tone. I've heard of your feats, Naruto. You've defeated enemies that would take entire armies to subdue. But power alone isn't enough to rule. You're young, and youth is often blinded by ideals. What makes you different from the others who've fallen because of their arrogance? Naruto's expression didn't falter. I'm not here to rule. I'm here to protect. If I've learned anything, it's that strength comes with responsibility. I've seen what happens when power is misused. I won't let that happen. Gaara, his voice soft but carrying the weight of experience, nodded in agreement. I understand that. I've walked that path. Power is nothing without the wisdom to wield it. You have the strength, Naruto, but do you have the clarity to see beyond it? Naruto turned his gaze to Gaara, his words thoughtful. I think I'm learning. I've had a lot of time to think about what's important, and it's not about being the strongest. It's about protecting the ones I care about, and making sure the mistakes of the past aren't repeated. Mei Terumi, the Mizukage, leaned forward with a glint of amusement in her eyes. You're very confident, Naruto. But can you walk the talk? Words can only go so far. The real test will be when you're put to the trial. Naruto nodded, his expression serious. I understand. I've faced battles before, and I'll face many more in the future. But I'll do it for a reason. Not for fame, not for power, just to make sure those who come after me can live in peace. There was a long silence in the room, the Kage exchanging glances. Naruto could feel the weight of their judgment, but he didn't waver. He wasn't just a Jinchuriki. As symbol of past pain, he was someone who had fought for everything he had, and who would fight to protect what mattered. Finally, Tsunade spoke again, her tone more contemplative. Your words are strong, Naruto. And your resolve is evident. But strength alone isn't enough. You must learn to balance that power with humility. This world is filled with challenges that require more than brute force. If you truly wish to be a leader, you'll need to prove that you can rise above the temptations of your abilities and lead with wisdom. Naruto's mind raced, the gravity of her words sinking in. The Kage weren't just questioning his strength, they were questioning his potential as a leader. It wasn't enough to be powerful, he had to be wise, compassionate, and, above all, selfless. I know, Naruto replied, his voice calm but resolute. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But I'm willing to learn. And I won't stop trying. Oniki's stern face softened just slightly. You remind me of someone I used to know, young, brash, and full of fire. But there's more to becoming a leader than simply charging ahead. I'll be watching, Naruto Uzumaki. You've got the power, but can you truly master it? Naruto gave a determined nod. I'll show you. I'll show all of you. The Rikage's scowl deepened, but he didn't respond. He was still wary, still unconvinced. But Naruto could sense that he had at least made an impression. And that was a start. As the meeting progressed, Naruto could feel the weight of the Kage's eyes on him. They weren't just concerned about his power, they were concerned about the future. A future where someone like him could change everything, for better or worse. By the end of the summit, Naruto had earned a measure of respect from the Kage, but there was still much to prove. He wasn't ready to lead, not yet. But his journey was only just beginning, and the world was watching. Later that evening, as Naruto stood outside the summit hall, looking out over the vast landscape, Jiraiya approached him, his voice low. "You did well, kid. I know you're not one for diplomacy, but you held your own." Naruto glanced at Jiraiya, his expression serious. "I know they are still not sure about me. But I'll prove them wrong." Jiraiya chuckled, his eyes softening with affection. "Just don't forget what you've learned. Power without wisdom is dangerous. You've got the strength, but now you need to understand how to use it." Naruto smiled, his eyes resolute. "I won't forget. I've got a lot to learn, but I'm ready for it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Naruto knew that the real battle had just begun. There were challenges ahead, enemies to face, and lessons to be learned. But he was ready. Whatever the future held, he would face it with all the strength he had, and the wisdom he was learning to cultivate. And with that, the path forward stretched out before him, uncertain, but full of promise. The sun had barely risen over the horizon, casting a golden hue across the training grounds where Naruto stood. The wind howled softly through the trees, carrying with it the scent of the forest. Despite the serene environment, Naruto was anything but calm. He had spent the last several hours training, pushing his limits once more, combining Chakra and Nen to enhance his abilities, practicing techniques like the Raise Nen, and focusing on the delicate balance between power and control. But today, something was different. Naruto had been feeling the weight of his abilities more than ever. The power within him was immense, unprecedented, but it was also growing more difficult to manage. There were moments when he felt as if it were pulling him in different directions, like an overwhelming force threatening to consume him. Yet, he was determined not to be overwhelmed. He had been given this power for a reason, and he wouldn't let it go to waste. After hours of rigorous practice, Naruto decided to try something different. He sat down cross-legged in the center of the training grounds, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. He had learned long ago that in order to master something, he first had to understand himself. To control his power, he needed to find balance within. This was something Jiraiya had often spoken of. There was strength in stillness, and true mastery came only when one learned to harness both the power of the body and the peace of the mind. As he focused on his breathing, clearing his thoughts, Naruto's mind began to drift. The familiar sensation of his chakra intertwined with the aura of Nen settled around him, a comforting embrace. But then, something changed. It was subtle at first, a flicker of warmth, a sense of presence in the air, but it soon grew, expanding outward like a vast ocean. Suddenly, Naruto's surroundings began to dissolve. The ground beneath him vanished, and the world around him shifted, replaced by an endless sky stretching out in all directions. He was no longer on his training grounds, but in some vast, ethereal space. His heart raced with both fear and wonder. What was happening? Was this a dream? A vision? Or something more? Then, a voice rang out in the emptiness. "Hey! You there?" Naruto whipped his head around, searching for the source of the voice. His breath caught in his throat when he saw the figure standing before him. A boy, no older than Naruto himself, with bright green eyes, messy brown hair, and a smile that radiated warmth and sincerity. It was as if the very air around him buzzed with a kind of boundless energy. The figure's presence was both comforting and familiar. Who are you?" Naruto asked, his voice hesitant. The boy laughed lightly, his tone gentle. Me? I'm Gon Freecss. But I guess I'm not really here, not in the way you might think." Naruto stared at him in awe, not understanding. "Gon Freecss? The Gon?" Gon's smile softened. "Yeah, that's me. But you don't need to know everything about me. You're here because I have something to share with you. Naruto's mind was racing. Gon Freecss was a legend, someone who had walked a path of unimaginable trials and growth. To meet him, even in a vision, was surreal. But as Gon spoke, Naruto found that he wasn't focused on the question of how he was here. Instead, he felt an undeniable sense of purpose. You've been struggling, haven't you? Gon continued, his voice filled with understanding. With all the power you've gained, you're still searching for something. A reason? A balance? Naruto nodded, his expression earnest. Yeah. I've got more power than I ever thought possible, but sometimes it feels like it's too much. I don't know if I can control it all, or even if I should. What if it consumes me? What if I become just like those I've fought against? Gon's smile didn't falter. He stepped closer to Naruto, placing a hand on his shoulder. Power's dangerous, that's true. But power itself isn't the problem. The problem is how you choose to use it. It's easy to get lost in the need to be the strongest, to be the best. But the truth is, being strong isn't enough. You have to be strong for the right reasons. Naruto listened intently, his heart heavy with the weight of Gon's words. He had always believed that becoming the strongest was the key to winning, to protecting those he loved. But now, faced with Gon's wisdom, he felt like he was seeing a different path, one he hadn't considered before. What do you mean by that? Naruto asked, his voice small. Gon's eyes were steady, full of experience. Power is only a tool. It's what you do with it that matters. The greatest strength isn't about defeating your enemies. It's about protecting what's important. Protecting your friends, your village, the world around you. You have to ask yourself, why do you want to be strong? If your answer is anything other than to protect, then that strength will consume you. Naruto's heart clenched. The words felt like a revelation, something he had needed to hear but hadn't fully understood until now. All this time, he had thought strength was the answer. He had sought it because he believed that if he was powerful enough, no one could hurt him, no one could hurt his friends. But now, with Gon's words echoing in his mind, Naruto realized that true strength came from something deeper than his own desire for protection. It came from the willingness to protect others, to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. You're right, Naruto whispered, his voice filled with newfound clarity. I've been focused on the wrong thing. It's not about being the strongest. It's about protecting those who need me. Gon nodded, his smile widening. That's it. Strength is a means to an end, not the end itself. You have the power to change things, Naruto. But with that power, you also have the responsibility to choose your path wisely. Naruto closed his eyes, his heart swelling with emotion. The weight of his abilities no longer felt like a burden, but a gift that he could use for something greater than himself. The path ahead was still unclear, but now he knew that the true purpose of his strength wasn't just to protect those he loved, but to create a future where peace and understanding could thrive. As the vision began to fade, and the ethereal space around him dissolved, Naruto whispered softly, "Thank you, Gon. I won't forget what you've taught me." With a final smile, Gon's figure vanished, leaving Naruto standing alone once more. But he wasn't truly alone. He was filled with the quiet certainty that he now understood the true meaning of strength. And as he opened his eyes, the world before him seemed a little brighter, a little more hopeful. When Naruto returned to the physical world, he felt different. Lighter. As though a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He stood up, stretching his arms and taking a deep breath of the fresh air around him. The next phase of his journey was about to begin. He didn't need to be the strongest anymore. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He had his answer now. His strength was for those he loved, for his village, and for the world. And no matter what trials awaited him, Naruto knew that with the spirit of Gon guiding him, he would be ready to face whatever came next. As Naruto walked back to Konoha, a sense of peace filled his heart. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he was no longer lost. He had a purpose now, something greater than himself to strive for. His journey wasn't just about power, it was about protecting the future and ensuring that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. The ground shook beneath Naruto's feet as the bells of Konoha rang in a frantic, desperate warning. The sky was overcast, a dull gray cloud hanging over the village, as if the heavens themselves knew what was about to unfold. Naruto's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted through the streets of Konoha, his eyes narrowing with determination. He had felt the familiar, suffocating aura that signaled destruction, the unrelenting power of pain. The rumors had been swirling for days. A force had appeared on the borders of Konoha, a group of ruthless figures calling themselves the Akatsuki. They had come for the village, and now, they were here, on the cusp of unleashing chaos. Naruto had faced powerful enemies before, but none had felt quite like this. He could sense the overwhelming presence of pain, of force so immense it made his own powers feel almost insignificant. Despite this, there was no fear in Naruto's heart. The lessons Gon had taught him still rang clear in his mind. He was a protector, not just of his friends and his village, but of the world. And I won't let them destroy what we've built, Naruto thought firmly, his resolve unshakable. He knew the task before him would test him in ways he hadn't yet experienced, but he was ready. As Naruto reached the center of the village, he saw it. Pain's 6 bodies stood in a distance, their eyes glowing with the ominous power of the Rinnegan. The city was already in ruins. Buildings had crumbled under the weight of Pain's might, and the air was thick with smoke and the cries of panicked citizens. One by one, the 6 paths of Pain turned toward him. Naruto's fists clenched at his sides as his aura began to radiate outward, surrounding him with an intense, unwavering energy. He could feel the power of his Nen and Chakra intertwining, a fusion of forces more potent than anything he had ever wielded before. I've fought a lot of strong enemies, Naruto called out to Pain, his voice steady despite the chaos. But you'll learn one thing about me, I won't back down. Not for anyone, and not for anything. Pain's 6 bodies stared at him with cold, calculating eyes, and for a moment, the world fell silent. Then, the first path of Pain moved, this one with the ability to manipulate gravity. With a snap of his fingers, a massive force pulled Naruto toward him, the weight of the pull nearly crushing his bones. But Naruto was ready. He reached deep within, drawing on the strength of his Nen. His aura flared brightly as he focused on Ren, pushing his energy outward to stabilize himself against the force of Pain's attack. The pressure built and built, but Naruto stood firm, his body glowing with the intensity of his spirit. I won't let you take me down that easily, Naruto yelled, his voice cutting through the storm. With a roar, he pushed against the gravitational pull, his Nen energy crackling like thunder as he released an explosive KO, a concentrated burst of his aura that acted as a shield, breaking the hold that Pain had over him. The blast knocked Pain's path backward, but it didn't end there. Naruto dashed forward, his body a blur as he engaged the remaining paths, each one with a different horrifying ability. He fought fiercely, combining the techniques he had learned Hajinkan for close combat, aura-infused Nen for massive destruction, and his mastery of Chakra to further amplify his abilities. His Chakra felt more alive than ever before, entwined with an energy that surged within him, creating an unstoppable force. Yet, Pain's power seemed endless. Each of the 6 bodies was a different incarnation of Pain itself, each more devastating than the last. One could control souls, another could summon monstrous beasts, and another manipulated the bodies of the dead. Naruto was pushed to his limits, but his resolve never wavered. In the midst of the battle, as the village continued to crumble around him, Naruto's mind flashed back to the lessons he had learned, to the vision of Gon. His mission had become clear, not just to defeat Pain, but to protect his home. This wasn't a battle for personal glory. This was about safeguarding the future. With a sudden, overwhelming sense of purpose, Naruto combined his Chakra with his Nen in a way he had never done before. His body glowed brighter than ever, and the wind around him began to whip up into a frenzy. The combined power surged through him, creating a massive barrier of energy that repelled Pain's most brutal attacks. You want to destroy Konoha? Naruto shouted, his voice filled with a new, dangerous energy. You'll have to go through me first. With the power of his aura-infused Rasengan in hand, Naruto charged. The ground beneath him cracked as he propelled himself forward at lightning speed. Pain's bodies tried to stop him, but he was unstoppable now. Every hit that came his way was deflected by his energy shield. Every attack he launched was magnified by the combined power of Chakra and Nen. He was a force of nature, a storm that could not be quelled. At the moment of impact, Naruto unleashed his final attack, a massive aura-infused Rasengan that collided with Pain's gravity-manipulating body. The explosion was cataclysmic. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through the village, knocking back the remaining paths of Pain and leaving a deep crater in the earth. The very air around them seemed to crackle with the aftermath of the blast, and for a moment, all was still. As the dust settled, Naruto stood at the center of the destruction, breathing heavily but unwavering. His clothes were torn, and his body ached from the exertion, but he had done it. He had protected Konoha. The 6 paths of Pain lay defeated around him, and the village was safe at least for now. But in the silence that followed, Naruto felt a strange emptiness. The battle was over, but something still gnawed at him. The true enemy had not yet been vanquished, the person behind the 6 paths of Pain. He had to finish this, for the sake of his village, his friends, and the entire world. In the distance, a figure appeared from the shadows: Nagato, the true leader of the Akatsuki. His eyes were filled with sorrow, and his voice carried the weight of a tortured soul. You may have defeated my paths, Nagato said, his voice low and steady. But you do not understand. You cannot protect this world by simply fighting. You cannot stop the pain of this world through strength alone. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Then show me another way. I've been protecting the people I care about all my life. I won't let you destroy this world. Nagato's face twisted with sadness. You are a fool if you think that the pain of the world can be solved with mere power. It is too late for this world. It's too late for us all. Naruto's resolve hardened. I refuse to believe that. I'll protect this world no matter the cost. The final confrontation was inevitable. Both were warriors: Naruto, armed with the strength of Nen, Chakra, and unyielding spirit; Nagato, burdened with the weight of the world's suffering and the consequences of his choices. As the two stood on the battlefield, facing each other, the world around them seemed to hold its breath. The fight would not be won through strength alone, but through the conviction of their beliefs, the will to protect or destroy everything they had fought for. Naruto clenched his fists. He would stop Pain. He would protect Konoha, the people he loved, and the world Gon had believed in. With the power of his Nen, his Chakra, and his newfound understanding of his true purpose, he would rise to face this challenge no matter what. The true test of his strength had just begun. The aftermath of the battle with Pain left Konoha in ruins, but it also marked the dawn of a new era. The village, which had once feared Naruto's power, now revered him. The people who had once scorned him now saw him as a protector, someone who had saved their home, their loved ones, and their way of life. The bond between Naruto and the villagers grew stronger as he continued to heal both the physical and emotional scars of the attack. His heart swelled with pride, not for his strength, but for the love and trust he had earned. Naruto had become a symbol of hope. But even as the village began to rebuild, Naruto knew that his journey was far from over. Every step he had taken had brought him closer to understanding the true nature of strength, and the balance between the powers of Chakra and Nen. His strength, though unparalleled, was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning. Months passed, and Naruto devoted himself to honing his abilities, ever searching for the perfect harmony between his two powers. Jiraiya had always told him that true strength came from the ability to control one's power, not simply to wield it. It was a lesson that resonated deeply with Naruto now, especially as he recalled his conversation with Gon. Power, he realized, was not just about victory, it was about protecting those you loved, protecting peace, and living up to the ideals that his father, his friends, and even his enemies had left behind. The village, too, began to see the changes in Naruto. His presence was no longer that of the loud, brash, and unpredictable ninja they once knew. Now, He was a quiet force, always thinking before acting, yet still fiercely dedicated to his mission. He had become a leader, one who inspired not through brute strength, but through his example. But with the respect he earned came new challenges. As Naruto walked the streets of Kanata, the whispers of the villagers reached his ears, questions about his future, doubts about his ability to balance the power of Nen and Chakra. There were some who feared that his strength, if left unchecked, might one day turn against them. It was during one of these quiet moments, when Naruto was standing atop the Hokage monument, overlooking the village he had sworn to protect, that he realized something. His true legacy would not be written in battle scars or the power he wielded. It would be written in how he used his strength to shape the future of the shinobi world. I have come a long way, Naruto murmured to himself. The wind ruffled his hair as he closed his eyes, feeling the warm rays of the sun on his face. But I can't just keep fighting. I need to teach others. Help them find their own strength. The realization was sudden, but undeniable. Naruto had been on the receiving end of so much wisdom in his life from Jiraiya, from Gon, from his enemies, and from his friends. Now, it was his turn to pass that knowledge on. Back in the village, Naruto sought out his friends, Sakura, Sasuke, and others who had fought alongside him in the Chunin exams, during the invasion of Kanata, and even during the battle with Pain. Together, they discussed the future not just of Kanata, but of the entire shinobi world. The landscape was changing. The villages were rebuilding, and the old ways of war and constant conflict seemed like an outdated way of life. A new world was emerging, one that required new leadership. Naruto began working with his friends to implement his vision for a peaceful future. He traveled to the other villages, speaking with the Kage and forming alliances. It was not an easy task, but Naruto was determined to unite the lands through understanding and mutual respect. And while the meetings were tense at times, Naruto's powers, his reputation, and his vision for a peaceful world gave him the authority he needed. He would not be just a powerful shinobi, but a guiding force in a new era of cooperation. But it wasn't just through politics and diplomacy that Naruto would leave his mark. He began training the next generation of shinobi, teaching them the same values that had carried him through his struggles: patience, perseverance, and compassion. He took on the role of a mentor, passing on not just his knowledge of Chakra and Nen, but his personal journey, the lessons that had shaped his growth. One of his first students was Kano Amaru, his younger cousin and former student. Kano Amaru had always looked up to Naruto, and now, as a young genin, he saw Naruto not just as a hero, but as a figure to emulate. He wanted to learn not only the skills of the ninja, but the strength to lead the next generation. Under Naruto's guidance, Kano Amaru began to grow not just as a shinobi, but as a person. Naruto's teaching philosophy was simple: true strength comes not from what you can destroy, but from what you can protect. He emphasized the importance of protecting others, of nurturing the bonds of friendship and trust that held the village together. To him, this was the true meaning of power. One day, as Naruto and Kano Amaru trained in the village's training grounds, the younger shinobi asked, "Naruto-sensei, how did you become so strong? I mean, everyone says you are the greatest ninja alive." Naruto smiled, his eyes softening. Strength isn't about being the best at everything. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. It's about learning from your mistakes, and always moving forward. Kano Amaru absorbed the words, nodding as he pushed himself harder during their training. He didn't quite understand yet, but Naruto could see the fire in his eyes, the same fire that had burned inside him as a child. He knew that, like him, Kano Amaru would one day find his own path. As time passed, Naruto's role as a teacher became more important. His influence grew beyond the confines of Kanata. He reached out to villages across the land, offering guidance and support in rebuilding their institutions, teaching young ninja how to harness their own nin abilities while still embracing the traditional shinobi ways. His teachings weren't just about raw power, they were about balance, control, and understanding the responsibilities that came with great strength. Naruto's relationship with Hinata deepened as well. They had always shared a quiet understanding, but now, with the burden of leadership weighing on his shoulders, Naruto found comfort in her presence. Her unwavering support reminded him of the importance of the bonds he had formed, and it was through her that he found the strength to continue his work. Together, they began to build a future not just for their children, but for the entire shinobi world. In the quiet moments of the evening, when the hustle of the village had slowed and the sun dipped below the horizon, Naruto often found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He had fought battles and defeated enemies, but the true battle was the one he fought within himself. The struggle to understand his purpose, to balance the fierce power of Chakra and Nen with the wisdom to use it for good. Now, standing at the forefront of a new era, Naruto realized that his legacy would not be measured by the wars he fought or the enemies he vanquished. It would be measured by the people he protected, the generations he nurtured, and the world he had helped create, a world where strength was not an end in itself, but a means to protect the peace and love he had always longed for. He had learned that strength was not about domination, but about understanding, about protecting the bonds that held people together, even in the darkest times. The story of Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who was once alone, would live on for generations. His legacy would be one of hope, compassion, and unbreakable spirit. A symbol of peace, forever etched in the hearts of those he had saved. And with that, Naruto knew his work was just beginning. The winds of war began to stir once again as the shadows of an old enemy loomed over the shinobi world. The Fourth Great Ninja War, though it had begun as a fight for survival, quickly became something much more, an ideological battle for the very soul of the shinobi world. And at the center of it all stood Naruto Uzumaki, the leader who had risen to become the world's most powerful protector. With his mastery over both Chakra and Nen, Naruto was now regarded as a living legend, a force so immense that even the most dangerous foes hesitated to challenge him. But even legends are tested, and in this war, Naruto would face his greatest trials yet. The news that Madara Uchiha, one of the most notorious and powerful shinobi in history, had returned from the dead spread like wildfire across the allied shinobi forces. He was joined by the resurrected Kaguya Akatsuki, the ancient being who had once tried to shape the world in her image. Their combined power was unimaginable, and the war against them seemed like an insurmountable task. But Naruto, ever the optimist, refused to accept defeat. He knew that the future of the shinobi world rested on their ability to protect each other, to fight for a common cause, and he was ready to lead that fight. The battle against Madara and Kaguya tested Naruto in ways he had never been tested before. Every ounce of his strength, every strategy he had learned, every lesson he had absorbed, was called into service. But he was not alone. He fought alongside his friend Sakura, Sasuke, Kakashi, and the entire allied shinobi forces. Their bond, forged through years of hardship and growth, was the backbone of their strength. But it was Naruto's leadership and his mastery of both Chakra and Nen that became the defining factor in the war. The first clash came when Madara Uchiha, wielding the power of the Sage of Six Paths, descended upon the battlefield like a storm. His power was overwhelming, and the allied forces struggled to hold their ground. His Rinnegan allowed him to manipulate the battlefield with ease, summoning meteors, and shifting the landscape with every attack. But Naruto, with his combined Chakra and Nen techniques, was more than a match for him. "Madara," Naruto called out, his voice steady even in the face of such overwhelming power. "This ends here." Madara smirked, his eyes narrowing. "You are the boy who has defied fate itself. But you cannot stop me. I am the true god of this world." Naruto's answer came in the form of an attack, a dazzling combination of Chakra and Nen, as he unleashed the Kyo-infused Raise-Nen, once so powerful that it tore through the air like a comet. Madara responded by creating a barrier with his Rinnegan, but Naruto's attack collided with it with such force that the impact sent shockwaves across the battlefield. The ground cracked, and the skies seemed to tremble. Madara staggered, surprised by the force of the attack. For the first time in years, he began to doubt his own superiority. "You're strong," Madara said, his tone darkening. "But you will need more than that to defeat me?" Naruto's answer was simple. "I don't need to defeat you alone. We fight together." And with that, the forces of the allied shinobi forces surged forward, uniting in a collective push to overwhelm Madara. But it wasn't just raw strength that carried them forward. Naruto's leadership and his ability to inspire hope fueled their every move. His presence on the battlefield was a beacon, a symbol of unshakable resolve. Even against an enemy as powerful as Madara, the shinobi world stood strong. The battle was long and grueling, but Naruto's combination of Chakra, Nen, and Indomitable will prove to be the key. With Sasuke and Sakura by his side, he broke through Madara's defenses and struck a devastating blow. Madara, who had once believed himself to be invincible, fell to the ground, his plans for domination crumbling before him. But the war was far from over. No sooner had Madara been defeated than Kaguya and Satsuki, the ancient goddess of Chakra, revealed her full power. Her appearance was a terrifying one. Her chakra radiated an eerie, otherworldly energy that threatened to swallow everything in its path. Her abilities were unlike anything Naruto had ever faced. She could warp space and time, create multiple dimensions, and summon terrifying creatures from the depths of her power. Naruto, however, remained calm. He had faced countless challenges before. This, too, could be overcome. Kaguya's first move was to trap Naruto in a pocket dimension. The space around him twisted and warped, and the air grew thick with oppressive chakra. But Naruto, drawing on his mastery of Nen, entered a state of deep concentration. He activated Ren, expanding his aura to its maximum capacity. The pressure of the dimension was immense, but Naruto pushed back with all the strength he could muster. "Your power cannot control me?" Naruto shouted, his voice full of defiance. "I am not bound by this world's rules." Using Kyo, Naruto concentrated all of his aura into a single point, a devastating attack that tore through the dimensional barrier. The energy surged outward, ridding the fabric of space and allowing him to break free from Kaguya's trap. Kaguya's eyes narrowed, sensing the sheer magnitude of Naruto's power. She reacted quickly, summoning tendrils of energy to strike at him. But Naruto, with his newfound control over his Chakra and Nen, responded with a move that left even Kaguya speechless. A Nen infused with Ren, creating a sphere of pure energy that detonated with a force that shook the very earth. "Impossible!" Kaguya shouted, barely dodging the full brunt of the attack. But it wasn't enough to stop her. Kaguya launched another attack, this time creating an army of shadow clones and massive, monstrous creatures to overwhelm Naruto and his allies. The battlefield erupted into chaos as the forces of the allied shinobi forces fought back with all their might. Yet even as they struggled, Naruto remained the unwavering force at the heart of their resistance. He called out to his comrades, urging them forward. "We're not done yet. Together, we'll end this." Naruto's words, combined with his unmatched strength, gave the allied forces the courage to push through the chaos. He and his allies Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, and the rest fought with unyielding determination, and slowly, piece by piece, they chipped away at Kaguya's defenses. The final confrontation with Kaguya came in a battle of wills, one that tested not just their physical strength but their resolve. In the heart of the battle, Naruto, with his mastery over both Chakra and Nen, fought Kaguya in a clash of elemental energy, the air crackling with power. Kaguya summoned massive cosmic forces, but Naruto, drawing on every bit of his training and strength, combined his Chakra and Nen techniques in ways no one had ever seen before. His aura-infused Nen crackled with a new intensity, channeling both his Nen and his Chakra into a singular, cataclysmic attack. As he launched it toward Kaguya, the force of the blast tore through her defenses, creating an explosion that consumed everything in its path. With a final, deafening roar, Kaguya fell, her immense power disintegrating in the wake of Naruto's attack. The Fourth Great Ninja War ended with the victory of the allied shinobi forces, but it was Naruto who stood as the true symbol of the war's outcome. His strength, his resolve, and his ability to unite the shinobi world had brought an end to the chaos that had threatened to consume it. In the aftermath of the battle, Naruto stood before his comrades, his friends, and the villagers, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. His journey had been long, and the war had tested him like nothing before. But through it all, he had remained steadfast in his belief that peace could be achieved, that strength was not meant for domination, but for protection. As he looked out over the horizon, He knew that the legacy of the shinobi world had changed forever. A new era had begun, one of unity, of hope, and of unyielding strength. The next generation would learn from his example, and Naruto's name would live on as a symbol of what could be achieved when one fought not for power, but for the people they loved. And with that, Naruto Uzumaki, the protector of peace, smiled. His journey, though long and difficult, had been worth it. And now, he could finally begin to build the world he had always dreamed of.